The servers are the 7 Chaos Emeralds. Hello there, friend. How are you?
What were you saying before?
Huh. It's something my grandmother taught me. I'm never to forget it. It goes like this. The servers are the 7 Chaos. Chaos is power, power enriched by the heart. The controller is the one that unifies the chaos. But I'm still not sure what it all means. But the number 7 is the same as the number of emeralds there are.
Emeralds?
Forgive me, but I don't think we've ever met before. I'm Tikal, and you are?
Sonic Adventure is very special to me. I only have the DX version on the GameCube, but still, I love this game. Out of all the 3D Sonic games, this is the only one that I think Sega ever did right. There are some very big things to complain about, but it's still a wonderful game that I do consider to be a classic, which I just can't say for anything that came after that. First, let me say that I'm not some dunderhead who can't keep up with the times and doesn't think that any game could possibly be good if it isn't 2D. I've played games like Sonic Advance 2. You cannot make a decent Sonic game just by simply making it 2D, or ruin it just by making it 3D. It doesn't have to be 2D in order to be good. This game is proof of that. Now, a lot of folks think that if a 2D Sonic game was suddenly seen from a different perspective, it might look something like this. I think this is wrong. Many recent Sonic games have had horrendously linear 3D sections that supposedly mimic the Genesis games because many think the Genesis games were simplistic and linear as well. This is not true. As I have stated before, most of the environments of the Genesis games were wide open spaces with lots of room to explore. Recent games like Sonic Unleashed and Sonic Colors have these weird things called paths that restrict your movements and make the game more linear. These roads are claustrophobic and simplistic. These new games boast that they feature more than one path, that they sometimes have it split into 2, or even 3. Wow! Honestly, I don't think this is very impressive. Sonic should not be limited to a few set paths like some car on a highway. Any 3D environment should spread out in all directions and allow you to really explore on your own. You should still have a certain destination, and you don't have to go everywhere aimlessly, but you should be allowed to. And those of you who think I'm asking Sega for too much, that they work so hard as it is, well, then they should give Sonic to Nintendo because Nintendo can do anything. Sonic Adventure sadly succumbed to moving the player along a certain path, sometimes, but Sega did a wonderful job working around that. These environments hardly feel linear or repetitive, and there are wonderful stages like Twinkle Park Act 2 where you really can just go anywhere and do whatever the hell you want. As far as this whole exploration thing goes, this game had a lot more of it than Sonic Adventure 2 or Heroes did. Something a lot of fans complain about in the older 3D Sonic games are bad camera angles that supposedly make it hard for them to tell where they're going and make them die and apparently make the 3D games universally bad. I don't buy any of that. I've played these games a lot over the years, and I've never lost my way or had a hard time staying on my feet. These people must be exaggerating, because this really isn't hard to play if you have even the most basic gaming skills. The camera's just fine. A lot of fans have this weird idea in their heads that a Sonic game should be completely devoid of a storyline or plot, but Sonic games have always had some amount of story, even if there weren't any words. One thing fans find easy to complain about is the inclusion of other characters to play as. You can play as Sonic and 5 others, all of whom have their own unique functions. Tails from Sonic 2 can fly, Knuckles from Sonic 3K can climb up walls, Amy from Sonic CD can smash things. And then there are 2 new characters, Big the Cat, who is painfully slow and whose story is essentially a series of mini-games, and E102 Gamma, one of the most unique and beloved characters in the entire series. Oh, and he blows shit up, which is always cool. The storyline is a lot more complicated than it might seem at first, but that isn't because the underlying plot itself is complicated. A long time ago, Knuckles' ancestors were wiped out by a big scary monster known as Chaos, the god of destruction. A girl's heroic sacrifice seals Chaos within the Master Emerald and he is trapped there for many years. After Chaos sleeps for Chaos knows how long, Robotnik destroys a Master Emerald to release this god of death who has been reduced to nothing more than a walking puddle, and starts collecting Chaos Emeralds to feed them to Chaos because if he gobbles them all up, he'll be restored to his ultimate form and help Robotnik take over the world. The girl's spirit, her name is Tikal by the way, has also been released since the seal was broken, and she guides the player through their quest regardless of who they are playing as well as occasionally making them travel back to her time. In the end, Chaos betrays Robotnik and intends to drown out all life. Sonic transforms into Super Sonic after Perfect Chaos discards the emeralds and saves the day by beating the evil out of this mother. Sounds simple enough, right? It's the way the story is told that makes it complex. These characters all have stories of their own. Well, except for Big. His story really isn't much to talk about. Froggy, come back! Most of the characters develop beyond what they were in the Genesis games, and Gamma's death was especially tragic. These storylines each have their own pace and begin at different points in time and almost randomly cross over with other stories here and there. So while one thing is going on with one character you're playing with, you can assume that another character is up to something else in some other zone right now. It's a little hard to follow, but it's still very interesting. There are some things you'll never understand if you only play with some of the characters and not all of them. Most of them move reasonably fast and control smoothly, and while they often visit the same zones that other characters have been to at some point or other, certain characters visit areas that others cannot. I actually think it's kinda cool and immersive to think, hey, just a few hours ago this person was standing right here, but I bet they didn't think to look at this way. I don't know, that's just me. The downside to this is that you visit these zones several times in the long run, and almost every character going to the same places at one point or other gets a little repetitive. Still, it's forgivable, since there's still quite a lot to be explored regardless of who you play as. The only one I don't enjoy playing as is Big because he's kind of a waste of time. I'm not a big hater. Playing as him simply isn't fun because he's so restricted and can't do any of the cool things other characters can do easily. Even Amy has more mobility and she kicks ass in this game. I'm not going to get into the way each character plays, but Sonic himself functions very well. The only thing I don't like about the way he moves in this game is that the spin dash doesn't need to be charged up at all. In fact, you can just spam it to rapidly hurl yourself to the end of a stage in no time at all by simply tapping the button repetitively. And I just think that takes the real fun and satisfaction out of it. In fact, just for that added oomph feeling, I'll always let it build up for a few seconds before letting go of the button. Now for something that has a lot of fans talking recently. The homing attack. Some people are going to say, what's wrong with Sonic getting new tricks? He got the Insta-Shield in Sonic 3. The Insta-Shield doesn't break the game or make it much easier than it would be without that function. The homing attack makes things much more one-sided in your favor. Even though Sonic 3D Blast supposedly had a shield that gave you a little something kinda like the homing attack, this game is where the homing attack really originated. Instead of simply aiming toward an enemy, which surprisingly is harder to do in 3D than it is in 2D, you press the jump button twice to home in on them like a missile and whammo! Sounds pretty simple, right? Here's the thing. In the Genesis games, whatever momentum you had built up before making contact with an enemy determined how far you would bounce. However, the homing attack is always at a set speed and cannot be changed, and does not give you much hang time on its own. It's more like teleporting yourself a short distance just by tapping a button, and not really moving. I think they could improve the homing attack by making it a little less automatic, let you home in on an enemy, but you'd have to build up the power of it on your own. Sadly, Sega has never done anything like that, but I will forgive them in this game's case because I love it so much. Sadly though, there are other things that feel automated, such as springs and loop-de-loops. In most cases, you bounce from one spring to another and another without doing anything but touching that first spring. The game is essentially playing itself. Also, to make it through a loop, simply push forward on the control stick regardless of how the camera angle changes. Honestly, that isn't so bad, and I can understand that it would be tricky to work their way around that, but some of these loops just suck you in, and you can go a few seconds without having to press anything. But again, this was forgivable for their first try at making a completely 3D game, since these things aren't taken to such an extreme or appear so frequently that they'd break the game. One thing they did get right though was the platforming. The lily pads in Emerald Coast, the seesaws in Red Mountain, the stalactites in Ice Cap, the shifting walls in Lost World, the giant red gears in Hot Shelter, and so many other things. This game is saturated with platforming, and that really helps in a Sonic game, especially a 3D one. Sonic Adventure is loads of fun and rarely feels repetitive in its level design. There are also these things called level up items that each character has at least a couple of. These give you new abilities that can help you out. Tails has an upgrade that makes him fly faster, allowing him to cover greater distances while airborne. Amy gets an upgrade that lets her spin her hammer around wildly to destroy any nearby enemies. Knuckles gets an upgrade that lets him dig underground. Gamma gets an upgrade that lets him hover. Big gets a freaking floaty. Sonic gets to fly along trails of rings. On top of that, there are many items that you don't even need, but can find if you look hard enough. For example, after the egg carrier falls into the ocean in Gamma's story, there's one room you couldn't access before that you can now to find an item that upgrades your gun so it can make bigger explosions that could possibly engulf more enemies. There's also something for Sonic at the Station Square Hotel that you can reach only after getting the Lightspeed Dash. Use the dash to reach a door on a balcony. Before it closes and you'll find an upgrade that lets you charge your dash much faster. And then Big has like 5 items that give him bigger fishing reels so he can catch bigger fish with ease. Ugh. Again, a lot of these items aren't necessary for completing the game, and a few of them you'll rarely use in the long run, but most of them really do help. Some of you are probably thinking, well, it's such a pain to have to collect these things. Why can you have all these abilities from the beginning? Well, honestly, I think the homing attack should be an upgrade and not something you have from the beginning, considering how unnatural it feels. I mean, Tails using his tails to attack and fly is a bit far-fetched, but not nearly as much as some of these new abilities. Most of these abilities are powers that these characters were not born with and should not naturally have to begin with. That's why it's better to upgrade them with these special items. As for how the game controls, I think it flows a lot more smoothly than something like Sonic Unleashed. Some have complained that it's difficult to control where Sonic is going in a big, scary 3D environment. But if that's the case, just how good are you at playing video games in general? The controls here are fine, it's pretty easy. I never had a hard time moving around. If anything, this game is kinda easy that way. The layouts on their own are challenging, but seriously, anyone who actually has a hard time controlling Sonic or any of the other characters here makes me doubt they can play video games, period. And if they somehow can play other games and they simply have a hard time controlling this, well, then that's just weird, because it can't be the game's fault. Like I said, I've always been able to pick up and play this game, even if there are some others that I have a difficult time with. It all depends on the player.
This place, it looks familiar. It's not a dream after all!
Get out of my way!
No way!
Did you hear what I said?
I won't obey!
We need those 7 emeralds to give us total power! It's power for the people! And they are your people too, you know! We must get that emerald!
Greed is our enemy. Once it starts, you will always want more. Please don't do this. I beg you.
Bah! I don't listen to the words of a child! Ready, men? Charge!
Father!
One thing some find odd is Station Square. Sonic was never someone who fought only for humans, yet here he is in a human city. Where are all the anthropomorphs? You know, half people, half animals like Sonic? I mean, most of the animals seen in the Genesis games were flickies, which you do see in this game as well, but you don't see any anthros walking around like you might see in any of the comics. It's not even a healthy mix of anthros and humans. It's just humans everywhere. You meet a bunch of echidnas in the past, but they lived like 1,000 years ago. Some think there was either some furry holocaust between this and Sonic 3K, or that all the anthros are simply in some other country made exclusively for them, which is silly. Luckily though, these humans only appear in the adventure fields, which are junctions between all the zones, which you shouldn't have much trouble getting out of if you're smart. I do love that you can talk to the beach babes though. That is a funny thing to see in a Sonic game. While the adventure fields may try to imitate the real world, the actual levels don't do that. Once you're outside the city, every single zone is surreal and colorful, which is how they should be. Even Speed Highway, a city, looks wonderfully wacky. No matter how much detail they have, Sonic games shouldn't try to look like a real world. How is that at all creative or unique or imaginative? When the gameplay is at its most pure, where it really counts, Sonic Adventure is a true Sonic game. The music is very good overall. A few tunes here or there might sound iffy, but the in-game music is great. A lot of fans, myself not included, hate hearing rock music in Sonic games because I think it destroys a nostalgic or otherworldly feel. I guess I can kind of see where this is going, but I don't see a problem, since I'm sure Sonic himself loves rock music. In fact, if Sonic carried a CD player or MP3 or iPod or whatever around with him all the time, I assume he would just listen to rock music constantly. As far as rock goes though, this is not just constant riffing or wailing with drums in the background. This is electronic rock, which is much more diverse and feels more universal than generic rock might. I think Sega did a better job with SA1 soundtrack than in most of the other 3D games. Some of these tunes, such as Speed Highway at Dawn, are overwhelmingly nostalgic and are an easy reminder of a better time for Sonic, the 90s. Cutscenes of other kinds of music, and each character has their own theme song. Most of them are okay, though Knuckles' theme, while okay this time, was a bad sign of things to come. Amy's song is just so weird and freaky I can't help but smirk. Tails' song is probably the most nostalgic of them all. This game also has voice acting. Most of these voices are okay and fit the characters pretty well. Sonic himself sounds like a 90s kid, you know, all dude and yeah. But it's okay because he sounds like he really talks that way, and not just some poor imitation of this. Ryan Drummond doesn't emphasize everything obnoxiously like most of those 4Kids chumps do. Tails sounds a bit dull, but he makes it clear that he's dealing with insecurities and having to leave Sonic's shadow and grow up and all that shit. Amy is a city girl who boldly makes her point, though that isn't really how she seemed in Sonic CD. Her pitch is a bit odd, but I think it fits the character just right. Knuckles sounds excellent, all cool and relaxed and like a really deep guy, which I easily prefer over Dan Green's I'm a big bad tough guy. Rawr. Really, Dan Green is okay, just not as Knuckles. Knuckles is a gullible guy, and he's pretty rough in Sonic 3K, but SA1, he does not by any means sound like a stupid person. I miss Adventure Knuckles. Gamma only ever appeared as a character in this one game this one time, but his voice here is definitely more fitting than his obnoxious, screeching voice from Sonic X. He is soft-spoken and monotonous, but everything he says is spot on and he is a surprisingly sympathetic character. I think his English voice actor did a great job making him sound just barely alive enough, considering he's a robot. Big? Well, what can I say? I just don't know. Takal sounds okay, and Robotnik, oh man, he's awesome. As for the 3D character models, well, I have the DX version and the character models were changed, so I'll talk about Sonic's new look next time, though I will say that Robotnik's model in Sonic Adventure 2 is a huge improvement over the one used in this game. One last thing to mention, you collect the emeralds automatically when progressing through the story, and only get to play as Super Sonic at the end. It really is a cool story, and it makes Super Sonic more special, but even though I think it was okay this time, this would continue into later games, which is kind of sad. Plus, we'll never see Hypersonic again. Oh well. In spite of all its faults, Sonic Adventure is a gem among all the 3D crap of recent years. It isn't the best Sonic game ever, but I do think it's the best 3D Sonic game ever. Love it or hate it, it stays true to the Genesis games more than any of the other 3D games do, and I'm sad that Sega might never be able to replicate or surpass it with anything else. Next time the 90s come to a close, I'll talk about Sonic Adventure 2. Toodles! Open your heart, it's gonna be alright.
Hey, I'll play with you some other time.
Chaos has changed again, this time for the better.
Yeah! Supersonic must have neutralized it, so it's nice again.
These are the Chow you were protecting. They stayed alive for generations and now live peacefully with humans.